Ladies and gentlemen, hello, and welcome to this new episode of Sudan in Focus weekly news magazine, which focuses on Sudan news and events, aims to give the Sudan TV audience a broad and first-hand information about what is going on in Sudan. So let's go.
Seguidamente, la Asamblea
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Burhan Abdel Rahman al-Burhan, President of the Transitional Sovereign Council of the Republic of the Sudan.
President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council, TSC, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, addresses on Thursday the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, which kicked off its activities on Tuesday at the UN headquarters in New York. Burhan said that the Rapid Support Forces, RSF militia, deserves to be classified as a terrorist group due to the crimes of ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, and genocide it has committed.
Sudan is facing very serious challenges. And in fact, a war is being waged. There's a conspiracy. A war is being waged by a group that has rebelled against the state for many years. It's receiving political and logistical support at the local and regional levels. You've all witnessed the crimes, the violations, and the atrocities committed by these rebels, targeting the Sudanese people and the Sudanese state. The war began with an attempt to seize power through force. With time, it's transformed into a total war against the Sudanese state and the Sudanese people. Countless crimes have been committed: ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, and genocide. All of this has been committed by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, which should be considered a terrorist group.
Noting that it unfortunately finds support and assistance from countries in the region that provide them with money and mercenaries to achieve political and economic gains in blatant defiance of international law and will.
This militia is continuing to perpetrate crimes, and it is most unfortunate that it is receiving the support of some states in the region, states which are providing funding and mercenaries for their own political and economic benefit, in flagrant violation of law and international will. Mr. President, these terrorist groups have also hit diplomatic missions, other organizations, and property. They have not spared the UN, and in fact, UN headquarters, the UN office in Sudan, has been targeted. The Dagalo family has been violating all laws and all international obligations with impunity. The family refuses to comply with the Jeddah Declaration and rejects UN Security Council resolutions regarding the arms embargo imposed on Darfur. Thus, ethnic cleansing crimes are continuing. Most recently, we also recorded a violation of the resolution on El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur State. This begs the question, why has the international system not taken any firm or dissuasive measures vis-à-vis this group and those who support it?
Burhan said Sudan is facing challenges and conspiracies as a result of a war launched by a group that rebelled against the state with local and regional political and logistical support.
Ladies and gentlemen, this devastating aggression being waged by the RSF with the support of states in the region providing funding and mercenaries as well as weapons to the RSF have resulted in deaths of dozens of thousands of Sudanese and the displacement of many millions more. Sudanese people have been forced to leave their lands, their motherland, to evade these armed groups. They've taken refuge in various regions. Millions more Sudanese are living in peace today in other parts of the country. Systematic attacks committed by the militia are contributing to the suffering of our compatriots. As a result, we've been seeking a peaceful solution to the situation, and the Jeddah Declaration, dated May 2023, should have been enough to put an end to this war. And yet, regional political players who are in favor of the war have a different take on the situation. This has resulted in the situation we have on our hands today. As a result, so as to alleviate the suffering of our fellow Sudanese and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance, we've opened our borders and airports. We've lifted all impediments to this aid being delivered.
President Burhan pointed out that Sudan is determined to continue its policy of facilitating humanitarian action and protecting convoys and humanitarian and medical teams, stressing Sudan's full commitment to international humanitarian law and procedures for protecting civilians. On the sidelines of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, General al-Burhan held meetings, including the Secretary-General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, and others heads of state and government from various countries of the world. President Burhan briefed the UN Secretary-General on the crimes, violations and atrocities committed by the terrorist Rapid Support Forces, RSF militia against defenseless citizens, and its targeting of infrastructure, hospitals, and public facilities, stressing the need for such violations and crimes to find clear condemnation from the international community, especially since it is targeting defenseless civilians. TSC President also briefed Turkish President on the crimes and atrocities committed by the terrorist Rapid Support Forces, RSF militia against civilians, and its devastation of the country's infrastructure, pointing to the Sudanese government's response to calls for peace and its participation in the Jeddah talks, which led to the signing of the Jeddah Agreement in May 2023, an agreement that the rebel RSF militia did not commit to implementing. President of the Sovereignty Council also briefed the Iranian president on the overall situation in Sudan, against the backdrop of the terrorist Rapid Support Forces, RSF militia's rebellion against the state and its institutions, stressing the government's cooperation with all initiatives aimed at resolving the crisis through dialogue, but the intransigence of the rebel militia prevented that. President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, received Prime Minister of Somalia, Hamza Abdi Barre, on Friday, on the sidelines of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The meeting reviewed the cooperation relations between the two countries and ways to support and develop them to serve the interests of the two countries and the two brotherly peoples, in addition to the developments in Sudan, the latest developments in Somalia, and issues of the joint interest. President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council TSC, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, met on the sidelines of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, Mizanbeath Tvinnereim, Minister of International Development of the Kingdom of Norway. President al-Burhan also met with the head of the Libyan Presidential Council, Mohammed al-Menfi, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Benedicto K. Orama, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the African Development Bank, Secretary-General of the League of Arab States, Ahmed Aboul Gheit, and others world leaders.
أنا سعيد بهذا الحضور وسعيد بأن أتحدث إليكم.
President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council TSC, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, revealed that there is a lot of evidence proving the involvement of the UAE in the war in Sudan, as air traffic was monitored transporting weapons to the militia from the UAE to Uganda, and then to Chad, which is something proven by United Nations reports. Al-Burhan described, in a press conference held at the headquarters of the Sudanese mission in New York on Thursday, what is happening as colonialism with a new face that violates all international rules and laws in which regional organizations and countries participate, and the United Nations has failed to stop it. He said that the armed forces have a national duty to preserve the entity of the state and will not abandon defending the homeland, protecting national sovereignty, deterring aggressors, and preventing the state's decision from being mortgaged to colonialism and regional powers. The Sudanese community in New York City received on Thursday President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council TSC, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, where they lined up in front of the headquarters of the United Nations General Assembly and chanted, "One Army, One People." President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council TSC, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, returned to the country on Friday after leading the Sudanese delegation participating in the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. TSC President was received at Port Sudan International Airport by TSC member Abdullah Yahya, Minister of Cabinet Affairs and Acting Prime Minister Osman Hussein, Minister of Finance Dr. Jibril Ibrahim, Minister of Labor Ahmed Ali Abdel Rahman, Wali Governor of the Red Sea State, General Mustafa Mohamed Nur, and TSC Secretary General Lieutenant General Mohamed Al-Ghali Ali Yusuf.
Seguidamente, la Asamblea.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Burhan Abdel Rahman al-Burhan, President of the Transitional Sovereign Council of the Republic of the Sudan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سيد الرئيس.
In the name of God, most merciful, most compassionate. Mr. President, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you. I speak before you today on behalf of the people and the government of Sudan. I would like to congratulate the President of this 79th session of the General Assembly and his team. We wish you every success, especially in the face of various threats to peace and security, threats which endanger our organization and which undermine freedom, peace and justice, leading to the violation of the law. Sudan stands convinced of the important role played by the United Nations. We support all initiatives geared towards reforming the organization and its bodies, specifically the Security Council, with a view to enshrining pluralism, collective security, and upholding human rights, all the while tackling the challenges of climate change and ethnically and ideologically motivated terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, Sudan commends the choice of theme for this topic, for this session, Unity and Diversity for the Advancement of Peace, Sustainable Development and Human Dignity. We welcome the priorities set by the President of this 79th session. Furthermore, it's important to implement the outcomes of the Summit of the Future, especially as regards United Nations reform and Security Council reform, so that these bodies can put an end to the protracted crises threatening international peace, as well as to achieve consensus and harmony in the relations between states and peoples. Unilateral measures taken outside the United Nations framework, in complete violation of the UN Charter and international law, political and economic restrictions, these are the main drivers of instability, especially as regards security, the economy, and also on the political front. All of this fuels war. However, I must also add that double standards and selectiveness are currently prevailing in international affairs. There can be no doubt about it. Sudan is facing very serious challenges. And in fact, a war is being waged. There's a conspiracy. A war is being waged by a group that has rebelled against the state for many years. It's receiving political and logistical support at the local and regional levels. You've all witnessed the crimes, the violations, and the atrocities committed by these rebels, targeting the Sudanese people and the Sudanese state. The war began with an attempt to seize power through force. With time, it's transformed into a total war against the Sudanese state and the Sudanese people. Countless crimes have been committed: ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, and genocide. All of this has been committed by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, which should be considered a terrorist group. This militia is continuing to perpetrate crimes, and it is most unfortunate that it is receiving the support of some states in the region. States which are providing funding and mercenaries for their own political and economic benefit, in flagrant violation of law and international will. Mr. President, these terrorist groups have also hit diplomatic missions, other organizations and property. They have not spared the UN. And in fact, UN headquarters, the UN office in Sudan, has been targeted. The Dagalo family has been violating all laws and all international obligations with impunity. The family refuses to comply with the Jeddah Declaration and rejects UN Security Council resolutions regarding the arms embargo imposed on Darfur. Thus, ethnic cleansing crimes are continuing. Most recently, we also recorded a violation of the resolution on El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur State. This begs the question, why has the international system not taken any firm or dissuasive measures vis-à-vis this group and those who support it? Despite everything that's been done, all the crimes, we witnessed crimes against humanity, war crimes, despite their refusal to implement Security Council resolutions and decisions adopted by regional organizations, all the more reason to call for Security Council reform to avoid this policy of impunity and double standards becoming key characteristics of this organization. Ladies and gentlemen, this devastating aggression being waged by the RSF with the support of states in the region providing funding and mercenaries as well as weapons to the RSF have resulted in deaths of dozens of thousands of Sudanese and the displacement of many millions more. Sudanese people have been forced to leave their lands, their motherland, to evade these armed groups. They've taken refuge in various regions. Millions more Sudanese are living in peace today in other parts of the country. Systematic attacks committed by the militia are contributing to the suffering of our compatriots. As a result, we've been seeking a peaceful solution to the situation, and the Jeddah Declaration, dated May 2023, should have been enough to put an end to this war. And yet, regional political players who are in favor of the war have a different take on the situation. This has resulted in the situation we have on our hands today. As a result, and so as to alleviate the suffering of our fellow Sudanese and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance, we've opened our borders and airports. We've lifted all impediments to this aid being delivered. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the Sudanese government is steadfastly committed to facilitating humanitarian assistance, protecting humanitarian convoys and personnel as well as medical personnel. We fully uphold international humanitarian law and measures geared towards the protection of civilians. The protection of civilians is our responsibility, especially when women and children are being hit the hardest by violations committed in areas controlled by the militias. Some women and children have even been sold in marketplaces. The humanitarian crisis affecting a large majority of our population, owing to the aggression being waged by the Dagala militia, require us to act in concert with one another. It's necessary to provide assistance to millions of displaced persons and refugees. On our side, we're doing everything within our power so as to ensure that aid is delivered to those who need it most. We would like to thank all neighboring states who've welcomed displaced persons and refugees. We thank organizations providing assistance to the Sudanese people as well. President, we face a very tall challenge. This organization must shoulder its responsibility, specifically so as to protect developing countries in the face of the avarice of some other states who would like to control our people's riches through the use of force, and specifically through the use of money. We hope that the will of our people will prevail. Numerous crises, including the one underway in Sudan, are the product of a policy of double standards, as well as political approaches based on exerting power, economic blackmail, and the fact that the organization has not managed to deter those who defy the will of their people and of nations, threatening international peace and security. Mr. President, today we have a marketplace of initiatives. Some of these initiatives serve narrow interests, and the corrosive effects of this are patently obvious. In our countries, artificial conflicts are growing in number. For this reason, we need national ownership, this particular principle, and that's why since the start of the crisis, we've done everything we could to put an end to this war and to spare our country from the destruction being waged by the Dagalo militia, attacking the Sudanese people. Thus, we contributed to various constructive initiatives, and we still harbour hopes of ending this conflict so as to guarantee the dignity of the Sudanese people and the sovereignty of our state. We are hoping to ensure that the conflict will not be resumed and conflicts will end. The path towards an end to this conflict is clear in our view. First and foremost, we need to put an end to the hostilities. The militias must withdraw from all of the areas they currently occupy and from which people have been displaced. They must lay down their weapons so that people can go back to their homes and so that assistance can be delivered. This will also facilitate the reopening of roads, airports, and the resumption of production. Second, this end to hostilities must be accompanied with a comprehensive political process so that we can see through the political transition, avoiding the resumption of war and potential coups d'etats. Mr. President, the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, is one of the state's oldest institutions. It's non-politicized. It's very much in favor of a democratic transition, and it's committed to the right of the Sudanese people to pick its leadership. This is why the SAF is upholding the commitments undertaken as part of the glorious 2019 revolution, so that a consensus government, an elected government, can accede to power. We will never accept a return to the previous regime, which was rejected by the Sudanese people. Thus, we are very much committed to facilitating the transition process, moving towards a civilian government. We will continue pursuing peace, working with all groups who have laid down their weapons, as well as with groups who still carry weapons but who are willing to respect the Juba Peace Agreement signed in 2020. Throughout this war, the Sudanese Armed Forces have done everything they possibly could, continuing to uphold international humanitarian law as well as the Geneva Conventions and protocols thereto, working to protect civilians and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. We stand ready to partake in all initiatives that can help to put an end to this war. As soon as we have an initiative that would respect the principle of national ownership and will put an end to the control and occupation of our territory by this rebel militia. We are also in favour of all initiatives which will protect civilians and guarantee the dignity of our people. These are the prerequisites for a return to democracy. It's unacceptable for a government as well as for the Sudanese people to partake in these, to see organizations who've supported the war, states who've supported the war and massacres of Sudanese partaking in such initiatives. Some of these organizations and states have allowed weapons to be funneled through their territory to the militias, and they've also provided political support to these rebel groups. We must therefore continue acting to convince the aggressors that they shouldn't be receiving this assistance. Mr. President, I'd like to thank all of the states as well as the organizations and various human rights defense groups as well as civil society organizations, all those who've tried to paint a true, accurate picture of what is happening in Sudan. I welcome the outcome of the Summit, the Great Lakes Summit in Rwanda, and the meeting that took place in Yaoundé. There, At all of these meetings, the RSF were described as a rebel group working against the state. We've managed to circumscribe the activities of this group and deter them. Hopefully we'll be able to deter them from acting in a similar fashion in other countries. The RSF should be called should be called out for what they are. They've rebelled against the state. They're committing terrorist crimes and should be considered as such here at the United Nations. Mr. President, before I conclude, I'd like to reassert our position vis-à-vis the issue of Palestine and the right of the Palestinian people to establish an independent state within 1967 borders. It's necessary to put an immediate end to the aggression being waged in Gaza and in Lebanon. We also call for Palestine to become a fully fledged member of the United Nations. By way of conclusion, we'd like to extend our gratitude to all those who've supported us through these testing times. Millions of Sudanese still need your help. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to reiterate that the will of the Sudanese people will prevail. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Transitional Sovereign Council of the Republic of the Sudan.
Thousands of Sudanese participated in many cities inside and outside Sudan in demonstrations to celebrate the victories achieved by the armed forces against the terrorist Rapid Support Militia. The chairman of the Sovereignty Council and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces General Abdel al-Fattah al-Burhan arrives to inspect the front line. With high morale and determination to eliminate the rebel Rapid Support Militia, Janjaweed, scenes of the deployment and the meeting of forces of Omdurman forces with naval forces on Saturday morning.
Marwi, or Marwa in Arabic, or Midwi or Bidwi in the Moroccan language, and in Greek Mepon, are all names of the city of Marwi, which is archaeological city in northern Sudan, located on the eastern bank of the Nile River, about 100 kilometers to the capital Khartoum and about 6 kilometers to the northeastern direction from the Kabushia station near the city of Shandil. And about 100 kilometers below is collection of the Bejrawiya series. Marwi city was capital of the Koshes kingdom for several centuries. The Koshes gave this name to the entire island located between the Adjara rivers in the north, the Blue Nile in the south, and the Nile River in the east. This geographical area is called region of Al-Butana. Among the tribes that live in the Merawi region are the Gabilas or tribes of Al-Shawaika, Al-Jamou'iyya, Al-Bidariya, Al-Rubatab, Al-Manasir, Al-Batahin, Al-Shukriya, and other major Ja'aliyin tribes. Merawi contains two important kosher sites. One of it Al-Naga'a and the other is Al-Musawwarat Al-Safra. One of the most important features of the Merawi sites is the presence of more than 200 pyramids in three groups called the Koshit pyramids, which are buildings of distinctive size and dimensions. Merawi was the southern capital of the kingdom of Nabata, which according to the Morwotic text extend its existence from the year 800 BC until the year 350 AD, and its name was Medwi or Bedwi. The antiquities revealed important evidence, especially in the Kosh's royal burials dating back to Nabata era or Nabata age, 800 BC, where the burials were transferred from the Jabal al-Barkal in the Nabata to Merawi. Merawi called also Birmingham of Africa because it was a rich kingdom and was famous with iron industry and global trade with India and China. Some believe that scholars such as George Andrew believe that origin of civilization in Nile valleys goes back to the Karma civilization, of which the Merawi civilization is considered an extension for it. The scientist William's Page proved that the Nubian pyramids were built on room in the rock and contained the bodies of the late kings that were usually mummified as mummies. In 1910, one of the English archaeologists and linguists carried out extensive excavations in the Greater Merawi Hills. The research resulted in the discovery of a large palace and numerous temples built by the rulers of Merawi. Therefore, in the year 2011, Merawi was chosen on the UNESCO World Heritage List. This indicates that Merawi is a very great Sudanese heritage city. So, it's an invitation to visit Sudan and its beautiful tourist areas.
The Nuba Mountains are an area about 30,000 square miles situated in the southern part of the state of Kordofan, Sudan. The Nuba are a cluster of diverse people speaking more than 50 languages. The Nuba Mountains cover around 50,000 km and have an estimated population of 1.5 million people, mostly Nuba. The main Nuba tribes are Akaran, Afidi, Dare. They are living in hills that is located in South Kordofan. Most people who live in the area are indigenous ethnic groups known collectively as the Nuba Mountains. People had been a part of Ayodhya. The history of the Nuba goes back to the early 16th century. Most of them are agriculturists with hills. Larises and large cultivations on the plains are their main crops are millet, sesame, corn, beans, groundnuts, onions, cotton, peppers, and tobacco. The village communities are organized by clan or extended family sections. They are primarily farmers as well as herders who keep cattle, sheep, goats, cows, and hens besides other domestic animals. Also they have a garden near their homes made of stone or plaster-covered thatch. The Nuba people are known by their rich traditional dancing, such as Kambala, and caring besides their unique clothes and folklore, as well as body painting and ritual wrestling. The Nuba sought to preserve their customs and tolerant culture. The primary religion of many Nuba people is Islam, with some Christian and special beliefs. The Nuba is a great people. They have a distinguished culture and deep-rooted history in Sudan.